Hello, welcome to the fifth episode of the SkillShine25 podcast. My name is Veer, a local high schooler, and unfortunately, my two friends are unable to join today, which is a shame because I'm meeting with Miss Shawn, former Sheriff Sergeant of Mecklenburg County, currently working as a parent advocate and a loving mother to her child. Miss Shawn will let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Shawn McLeod, mom to Chase Blackman. How are you?
Good. Now that we know a little bit more about you, do you mind elaborating what exactly both of your professions entail?
Okay, I'll start off at the sheriff's office. I worked there for 19 and a half years. I started off as a detention officer and later got promoted, went through the promotional process for a sergeant. And I was a sergeant there for about 10 and a half years. And I had an incident at work and I ended up getting hurt. And I was later ended up transitioning out of working as a sergeant there to administrative sergeant. And I did that for a few months. And then eventually I transitioned out of the sheriff's office into the school systems where I'm now a parent advocate.
Wow. So, what childhood situations and key mentors led you to your pathway as a sheriff?
Well, I would definitely say growing up in Brooklyn, I was always in an environment where there were different people you had to interact with, whether it's just going to school. Like our school system was a lot different here, so you interacted with a lot of different adults on the train just going to school in the morning. And one of the things that I found from my high school, because I had a pretty large high school, we had a student body of like 5,000 kids. Um, and the security officers and the transit officers that worked or were assigned to our school were very instrumental for me as a student in trying to make sure we were safe
Yeah.
at all aspects. They were very easy to talk to. Most of them, I don't know that it's necessarily in their job description, but many of them were very entwined into the happenings of young
Yeah.
people, and they were very encouraging through it. So I thought it was a cool thing where you're in uniform, you have a job description, but the everyday interaction was much more to the availability of helping students.
No, definitely. I mean, on paper, it just looks like these people are here to uphold the law, but
Right.
the actual job leads more into a community role where they play and connect and protect the community. And there's a
Yes.
lot of different areas within this job that I'm
It
considering.
is, and I think as you get older, I'll speak specifically for myself. As you get older, you realize the necessary importance of community and building that, and it starts to me at a very young age. When my experiences with law enforcement growing up in New York were more positive. Like I said, the officers that were assigned to our school or the school security officers, we we talked to them on an everyday basis, and I would take the leap to say a lot of them had very good relationships with a vast majority of the students because, like I said, we had a huge school,
Yeah.
and just having to interact with them and see them every day, it's it was like for some that uncle or aunt figure that you're going to see like, oh, I can't let them see me doing this because he's going to hurry
Yeah.
up and be like, oh, go to class, why aren't you in class? He's going to be asking you a million questions. You'll be like, let me just go to class
Hmm.
to avoid getting into any trouble. So it was definitely one of that feel of there's a community and we have to
Hmm.
work together to build this community.
Yeah. So, do you mind explaining a little bit more about what sheriff work entails, what the details of that are? I mean, when you say law enforcement, I know it's probably very different from what you see in the media, right? There's a lot more aspects to what your job is on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think the biggest focus that they don't share is the human interaction of law
Mm.
enforcement because at the sheriff's office there were different branches to what you did. There are people who are on patrol who were you'll see them in the streets in a patrol car. I was a sergeant that worked in the jail, so I worked inside the facility, but there were different areas even in the jail, records release, processing the inmates or and letting the offenders out. So there was people that work at the courts. So they were very there were varying aspects of your role at the sheriff's office in terms of a sergeant. It just depended on where you worked. Usually the responsibilities were, you would have a list of people that you're like that are assigned to you, so you're responsible for doing any reports, doing their reviews and stuff like that. But in general, your everyday interaction were not with just the people that you were responsible for on paper, but the inmates in the housing units. They also fell under your charge, because if anything happened, you were the one that had to interview inmates, write reports, and go through the list of anything depending on what happened that day. And working on the inside, the day could be, some days were very quiet, and then there were days where you were on go from the minute you get to work.
Wow. So I know that there is a big difference between city police and sheriff work. Do you mind explaining a little bit more about the differences?
Yes, the city police, they are more on hand where you'll see more cop cars and stuff like that. The sheriff office is more responsible for administrative stuff, serving papers, eviction notices, custody orders. They typically are the ones that's going physically knocking on people's door, giving them papers, letting them know like you have to go to court or you're expected to appear at court that way. But again, even though they have aspects of the sheriff's office that are on patrol, it's not in the same length of the police department, because the police department is usually more hands-on on everyday criminal activities.
Yeah, so it's an overarching job.
Right.
Okay. So what would you say is the best way for other high schoolers to get exposure and involvement with a career in law enforcement?
I think the reality of it is to understand that it's not an easy job, because I think it also takes a toll on you, because you interact with so many people with so many varying backgrounds. And for me, one of the things I took away from the experience working there, I was very fortunate in my family background. I took for granted that everybody had a supportive family or a village where they can turn to. And you realize to me, it's a very humbling job when you hear some of the stories, like when you sit to talk to people.
Yeah.
Because even though normally if you're meeting someone in jail, they're not in the best of moods. But over time, after talking to people, you realize like some people really had some extensive life lessons and history lessons that they had to go through very early in life. And it makes you stop to think like, how do I, as a person, affect change where I can help this person? And the reality of it, you're not going to reach out to everybody, but I have enough stories or experiences where I remember just having a conversation with someone. It was just like one of those things like, oh, nobody really ever took the time to sit and talk to me. Mm-hmm. Or nobody's ever understood that the place I was operating from was just not a good place. But again, it's one of those things, like just in life, you realize everything is not paved in an easy road for everyone. And you have to learn sometimes that people are giving only the negative experiences sometimes that they've had. So you have to be a catalyst, or it's incumbent to be a catalyst to understanding why someone's behavior is the way it is.
No, absolutely. I mean, humans are social creatures, and a lot of the time we take for granted the fact that we have people helping us, we have people to support us. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these people are just lonely. They're just lonely, they feel alone, they don't have anybody else to help them, and that's why they end up in certain situations.
Yes.
Right? And the next question is, if you could go back, what is something that you would tell your past self for guidance?
Something I would tell my past self for guidance. Not to be afraid, because initially going to college, I wanted to go to school in Florida, but I let the distance of living and being from New York, that hindered me going far. Mm-hmm. So I would definitely say take the plunge. You never know where you're gonna land, but in order to figure it out, you're gonna have to take the plunge. Yeah. And a lot of times you don't realize until you're there. Like, we all have ideally in our head how something is, or an environment might be, but it's not until you're there that you really get to see the ins and outs. Like just like any school, they paint a really pretty picture
Mm-hmm.
of school and the fun things and the academics and stuff, but understanding how that sits with you in your spirit, how are you gonna function or grow? You're not gonna know that until you get there.
Yeah.
I don't care how many videos you look at, and because people are gonna tell you what they want you to hear or what they feel will be that catalyst to get you to go someplace. But until you're there and you see it firsthand, the firsthand experience is usually what makes such an impact in your life.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that experience. I know a lot of people value experience when it comes to a profession, a career, because really you can learn as much as you want, but you're not going to have those certain skills that you gain from experience within that
Right.
profession. I know you touched on this a little bit, but how did your time as a sheriff translate to your work as a sergeant?
Well, the time that I was there, one of the bigger takeaways I'll say, it created a family environment. Because once you start working and you're an adult and you get into the work world, you realize you spend more time with your coworkers than you
Yeah.
typically do with your family. And understanding in any environment, I don't care where it is, you work better or you're more productive when your team gets along. So I would definitely say my takeaway from that, and just based, because even though I'm no longer there, there's still people I'm still in contact with because I made it my family
Mhm.
that was there. And there were times as a single mom, it was some of those people that helped me with Chase. Like if I couldn't get off of work and one of my friends who's on opposite shift, she would be able to pick him up for me. And those things make a huge impact into your daily life. And I just think remembering that humans, we need each other and
Mhm.
we have to, it's necessary that we connect in that way in
Yeah.
terms, because everybody's battling something at some stage in life. If you're going to live, you're going to go through, you're going to have hurdles you have to go over, and having people to surround yourself with that are helpful is very important.
Mm-hmm. I know recently this nation has had a lot of turmoil with law enforcement, and especially with COVID. How have these national events changed law enforcement for you?
I think with COVID, because I was still working there during COVID, excuse me, I think COVID exposed how lonely a lot of people really were in terms of their lifestyles and family histories. And there are a lot of sad people in the world. And I think the experience of that, you realize like, I still had to go to work. There was no, okay, there's COVID. So in law enforcement, you're not offered the luxury
Yeah.
of working from home. You can't work from home. And in having to go through that epidemic and still be at work again, I will come back to the same sound of it was the resilience of the people that you worked with that helped you get through your days, because we were working like 15, 16-hour shifts. So you're literally going to work, you're at work all day dealing with so many different personalities, but it may be the officer that I was in charge of that it was like, okay, Sarge, we're only going to be here another hour, just trying to help you get through it because your day could become so cumbersome. Law enforcement as a whole is a very tricky thing to navigate, because again, when you realize some officers, they don't have experiences dealing outside of their community. Most people don't typically go and interact with someone who's not either at their same school or their church or whatever. So having to understand, like culturally being aware of where people are coming from is very important. But again, you have to realize as a person how important it is to see life outside of your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding there are different ways that you're going to have to interact with people culturally. People operate different, and being aware and respecting that,
Yeah.
it will take us further in life.
Absolutely. So working within the sergeant environment must have been a very stressful, and of course, this job requires a lot of will, both mental and physical strength, which is why it is not for everyone. On that note, do you mind sharing some of the craziest experiences you have had on the job to let listeners learn more about if this job is for them?
So, one of the craziest experiences I had, because dealing in law enforcement, you tend to, and then now nationally they're making it more where you understand that you're dealing with a lot of people with mental health issues, and that crises is a very real thing. And one of the crazy experiences I had, there was this guy, like he had just gotten processed, just gotten upstairs, and he was raising all sorts of hell. Like he was pulling the sprinkler head. It was just like constantly with him. And I'd come into work because I was working night shift at the time. So when I came into work and I'm debriefing with the day shift sergeant, he's telling me, he's like, look, we've been running all day. This guy is doing this. He's like every hour he's pulling the sprinkler head. There's water. Like it's just a chaotic environment. So when I got on shift, my shift was cleaning up the work, the sprinkler head that he pulled. And later on, like I went upstairs to talk. I was going to talk to him, and he was very disrespectful. And so I was like, I'll just come back, because clearly he was in his crisis moment, and it didn't make sense to try to communicate with him then. And there was an officer, a veteran officer. He was there working a lot longer than I have, and he's also had experience of working in the prison system. And I called him. I was like, hey, I have this guy, such and such. I was like, I want you to come upstairs. And I had the officer that was running the unit was a Caucasian guy. But again, background-wise, he didn't have any experience. So you could see the fear on his face of having to interact with him. So when I was going to speak to the inmate, he was coming. And I knew he was coming out of, he's like, I don't want her to think, or my peers to think I'm scared. But as a sergeant, I have to recognize him being there is not going to make this experience any better right now. So I went upstairs with the veteran officer, and I told everybody else, I was like, you guys stay back. And he went in there to talk to him, and he was threatening him, and he was going to do all this stuff to him. And the officer just like yoked him up so quick. Like it was so, like it happened so quickly. And because the guy like soaking wet was maybe 140 pounds. And when he went to attack my my officer, but he yoked him up so fast. And he told him, he was like, look, he's like, don't make me have to come back up here. And I promise you from that day, I never had another issue out of him. When he came in, because the recidivism rate is very high. And so when he came in and he was giving an officer a problem, and the officer called me to tell me, oh, this guy won't stop banging on the door or whatever. And I was like, what's his name? So when he told me his name, I was like, go over to his cell and tell him Sergeant McLeod is the sergeant on the floor. So he was like, okay, I'll try it. Instead of then call me back and let me know what happened. So he went and he was like, it worked. And I was like, what? He's like, I told him Sergeant McLeod is the sergeant on the floor. I was like, oh yeah, he's going to chill out. But it got to the point, like if I needed something done, like I would utilize the inmates to do, like to mop the floors, like very simple things, because sometimes they just need to get out of that mental space of where they are. So when I'm at work and I know he's there, I'll tell him, look, after lunch, I need you to mop these floors for me. He'll come out, he'll mop those floors, won't say a word. No problem. He's like, well, call me if you need me after dinner. And it's as simple as that. But my most traumatizing experience was the one where I left the sheriff's office. We came to work that morning, and everything was delayed again. This was during COVID. Excuse me. And my officer called me. He's like, hey, Sarge, this person is refusing to go back to his room. So I said, okay. So myself and two other officers went in, and I went to talk to him. And this guy, typically, I've never had any issue with. And as I'm going to talk to him, he's like, no, Sarge, you're not going to be able to talk me back into myself, because I prided myself on being able to relate to you human to human. And he was like, no, you're not going to be able to talk to me. And as we were walking closer to him, he just like veered off and went to attack the officer. He had a weapon and he was trying to stab him with it. And like instinctively, it kicks in like I'm fighting with this guy. It was me and two other officers, but me at 5'6", 150 pounds, I'm fighting a guy that's like 6'3",
Wow.
300 pounds. And the experience, a lot of it I don't remember. And some of it, like I do remember, like I specifically remember holding on to the weapon. Like we fell on the floor. I ended up landing on top of him, but I knew I had that weapon in my hand and I was holding it. Like I was like, he cannot let go of this, because if he does, he's gonna hurt me, because he already stabbed one of the officers. So we're on the floor fighting. I look up and see one of the officers that came in with me. He's like, blood is gushing from his head like water.
Wow.
And like I just remember in that moment, like my train of thought was like, I'm gonna have to kill this person, because I was like, if I get this weapon from him, I was like, I'm gonna stab the shit out of him, and I would never ever want to have to be in that experience again, because it cost me like 2 years of insomnia. I couldn't sleep. It was a horrible experience, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And that was when I realized, I was like, I can't do this. And I remember when I was out of work praying, it was like, God, what's my next step? Because I had plans of being there 20 years to retire. And it came to me, it's like, you're never going to wear that uniform again. And I was at peace with it. And I was just so, well, that was the way it ended. And I was like, and I walked away from it and didn't look back. And, you know, I'm still, like I said, I'm still in contact with some people that work there, but I'm far removed from that place now and just in a different space. And I appreciate it for the things that it offered, the life experiences that it offered. But I was like, my expiration date happened and it was on to the next. So being in a space where, one of the things I would say I like about myself, I've never been one of those people who are so stuck in one place that I can't see someplace else. So looking for a way to reinvent yourself, looking for different things, because you can grow out of things that you want to do. And I think
you're not stuck.
Yeah, and one of the things high school students now, that you guys have a different perspective of being able to go and do these internships. You have to just put yourself out there. And you guys have more access to things that we didn't have back in the days. And I just feel like I hope all high school students, including my own child, take advantage of it. Because tomorrow is not promised with you, but you guys are like so smart in certain ways. And in other ways, I'm just like, the elevator does not connect with the teenagers. But I see consistently, like when I'm talking to other parents, I'm like, oh, it's not just me and my child. I was like, a lot of the parents are going through these same experiences. But again, understanding like our journey as teenagers. I was a teenager in the 90s. Mm-hmm. You guys are teenagers now, so certain things are definitely shifted while other things are consistently the same. Mm-hmm. And just finding a way to navigate that proves to me to be the most interesting thing about parenting.
Yeah, I appreciate that story. I know that was a challenging moment, and I'm glad that you shared that, and thank you so much for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
How has your share of work translated into your life at home and growth in personality?
I don't know that it necessarily translated, because my personality has always been, excuse me, a very direct person. And one of the jokes, like my friends would laugh about, even in high school, like my friends used to call me Miss McLeod, because they were like, I've always had this air of assertiveness about me. So it wasn't hard for me in terms of doing what I'm supposed to do in terms of like the administrative stuff, but understanding that the way your people connect with you, those were things that I had to work on, because I'm one of those people, I like to do things by myself. If I ask you to do something and you don't do it, it annoys me, so I end up doing it myself. But understanding again that if you work, understand that there's a village and you don't have to do everything yourself. And that was a huge adjustment, being able to delegate or ask people to say, oh, I need help. Yeah. Can you help me? And sometimes getting those words out of my mouth was like pulling teeth. But understanding now, it's okay to need help. Mm-hmm. That's what people are for.
That's what people are for. So I know you kind of already told us why the change to a parent advocate from the sergeant role.
Mm-hmm.
But if you had to go into more detail about why being a parent advocate spoke to you as the next step in life and what that kind of entails.
Again, after working in the criminal justice system, you can see inadvertently, especially in the community of color, that there are a lot of things in natural and resources that we're lacking. And it starts really at a very young age. I'm charged with being a mother to a young black man, and that's something that never escapes me. And understanding that the system that is built, the judicial system that is built, and there's a premise, I don't know if you've ever heard school, pipeline to prison.
No, I have not.
Okay, so there was research done showing that for young black men, by the time they're in fourth grade, they're determining how many prisons they need to build. Because of statistically, they're saying by fourth grade, you'll know if young black men are going to be able to venture any further than college or if they're going to end up in prison.
Based on their behavior and
Right.
test scores.
And when you see it from the inside, you can't help but wonder, how do you affect, or what can you do to affect change in this? And once I decided to go into CMS, you're getting a firsthand experience of how a lot of times parenting, or the lack of parenting, plays a part in the behaviors of these young men and women. And it's really a difficult thing to see, actually, because you're seeing younger children with more ailments, the IEP plans, the 504 plans, things that are done based on their behavior, the likelihood that they're going to do or behave in such a manner that they're going to need assistance. And you can't help but wonder, what's the cause of that? Is it necessarily the food that we're eating? Is it the resources that are available to us? Is it the lack of education and experiences? There's so many different factors that you have to take into consideration. And you realize, like, we are in a space where it comes back to humans needing humans. And how can I help direct someone to resources that may be beneficial to what this particular family needs based on whatever they have going on? Because everybody has something going on. And one of the things you learned in the school system, there's a lot of homeless kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very challenging to think, because like, I'll have to go on home visits. Some people are living in hotels. So like every couple of days they're going from place to place. And you think, what would your life be like if you didn't have this experience to live, or you didn't have, like, mom, like, we take for granted that we have a home, a roof over our head, but there's so many children, and we're talking about elementary age kids, that don't have that consistency. So the discipline of being able to wake up and just eat breakfast and go to school, get ready for school, it's not just that. Now you have to think, as a six or 7 year old, am I going to have some place to spend the sleep tonight? Am I going to be cold? So all those things plays a part, and it tugs on your human emotions, because I couldn't imagine Chase having to not know where he's going to sleep, or we're having to sleep in a car because we don't have a roof over our head. So if they're having those life crises, like, how are we really expecting them to function in school when they're not sure where I'm going to eat, or if I'm going to have something to eat?
Yeah, that pipeline statistic is almost very misleading, right?
Very.
Do you think that has been misinterpreted as a racial issue rather than a socioeconomic issue?
I don't think it's misinterpreted, because they were very direct in focusing on young black people and people
So
of
they didn't
color.
even look at the income-based part of it, or the community aspect?
I think when we're failing to be honest about how these lines are drawn, whether it's social, economic, racial, in order for us to do better, we have to acknowledge the things that I've done in the past and how it's trickled down to how it later affects us. And if we have generations of people who typically, for a lack of a better term, they keep separated based on where they live, you're not going to understand my struggle if you don't have a conversation with me. And you're not going to want to have a conversation with me if you think, like, as a human, like, they're beneath me.
Mm-hmm.
So people having the time or taking the time to talk about these things, these experiences. Some people have had really, really hard lives, and they struggle with seeing anything better because for the most part, they haven't seen any better. So they can't want something more if they haven't had an experience to see something different, and understanding that it's not just an emotional or financial situation, it's a mental aspect of it that you have to deal with. Because it's going to be hard for me to pull out of a kid, oh, you know, if you get a job and you work and you get these things, if you're seeing like your mom is working or dad is working all these hours and we still can't make ends meet. How do I convince a child who's seeing the struggle that there's something better on the other side when they're like, I can't see it? So understanding that it's a work in progress, and people working and trying to explain, and like I say, step out of your comfort zone and ask questions. You'll see a different aspect of life.
Mm. Wow. It's very eye-opening, I'd say. I mean, your profession has definitely showed you how much more there is to the world, right? There's so much diversity in not only ethnicity, race, gender, but lifestyle, mentality,
Right.
physicality. There's so many different areas, which is why every single person is unique and why the world is so vast.
Yeah. And I think if one of the things I've learned in life is when you go different places, because I like to travel, and one of the things that I'm always humbled by is how it's a balance of give and take. Like I went to Anguilla last summer. The island is 5 miles wide. So it's not big.
Yeah, yeah.
But the people there were so happy and so nice. And you're thinking to yourself, like, yeah, there's not much to do, but growing up in a place like New York and even moving to Charlotte, because even when I moved to Charlotte, I was like, oh, there's not much to do. Considering I grew up in New York, you're a train ride away from whatever ethnicity of food you feel like trying, or there's something to do that would perk your interest, whether it's museums, games, whatever you can think of, there's something you can do. And you go to a small little island where the island is literally 5 miles wide, and you're just like, these are some very happy people. Like, what is it that is in the water? But you realize when you take comfort in, like, just like the natural resources. I'm a beach person. So I can go to the beach and hang out for hours. And the tranquility of it, it's just like, oh, like to wake up to see this every day.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's people who are there and they don't go to the beach as much because they're so used to it. It's not that big of a deal to them. But being able to stop and just be aware of your surroundings, being thankful for the experiences you had, and recognizing like, oh, everybody doesn't have this. Or everybody doesn't have the option to say, oh, I don't want to eat Chinese food. I'll just try something different. You know, like I've heard people say, oh, I don't like, one of the things I've noticed over the years, people say, I don't like something. And I was like, do you not like it, or have you tried it? And a lot of times they've never tried it. So you can't say if you like it or not because you never tried it. So you have to open your mind to trying something different and putting yourself in a different environment.
Wow. Well, the final question I have is, what would you say is the best way for people to get involvement into this profession?
I think the reality for law enforcement, it's something, because there's a lot of legacy in the police department or sheriff's office. There's where, oh, my grandfather was this. So a lot of it falls from that. But understanding community and building a better world, for me, it's the human aspect of it. where you get the reward, because you realize in life as you get older, there's so many things we take for granted in how, or if you're interested in being impactful in someone's life. Let's be honest, not everyone has that urge or that feeling. But as you guys go away to school and go to colleges and you start dealing with different organizations and clubs and meeting people, that's when it really starts sparking your interest. Like, how do I become effective change? Can I become effective change?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll know for yourself as you develop and figure out who you are as a person, if emotionally this is something I can deal with. Financially, is this something that I want to take on? Because there's so many different roads to getting the job. Like, first you have to go through the academy, then you have to go through, like, you're constantly in training, and you have to know, is this something that I'm cut out for? And I think when people do it and they realize, like, I've had officers who come and they was like, I can't do this. I respect you being honest with yourself. I remember having days where I was like, I can't do this either. But fighting that energy to want to quit, I had to come figure out some ways I had to do it. And then I also got to a point where I was like, oh, this is no longer serves me. I'm not happy here. What's next for me? And sometimes you have to understand, you may have to bow out gracefully, but there's still other things in life. Like, as long as the world is turning, there's going to be something that you can spark an interest in you.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's a great place to end off on.
Yeah.
Thank you so
You're
much for your
welcome.
time.